afternoon. I'm Natalia Guzman, the CHCI PepsiCo Nutritional Health Graduate Fellow. I'm delighted to be with you today for the Sustainable Nutrition for Latino Families session. As someone who studied to become a registered dietitian nutritionist, I strongly advocate for community-based initiatives that improves and provide equitable access to nutritious foods to marginalized and food apartheid communities. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Novo Nordisk, Corteva AgriScience, DoorDash, Instacart, and Amazon for the generous support of this session. It is now my honor to introduce welcoming remarks from Damon Davis. Damon Davis is the Associate Director in the Alliance Development for Novo Nordisk, where he focuses on building impactful relationships in communities of color, faith-based organizations, men's health, consumer, and civil rights organizations. Please join me in welcoming Damon Davis.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, first of all, to CHCI for convening this panel of experts. I'm Damon Davis, Associate Director for Alliance Development at Novo Nordisk. Novo Nordisk is a global healthcare organization focused on meeting the unmet needs of people living with chronic diseases. And while our work spans the globe, I think it's important to note that we know that food issues with insecurity are as often at a localized level. Strengthening food systems is one of the monumental challenges of our time, and Novo Nordisk has a number of community-based programs designed to help meet some of these challenges. Food accessibility, the food's nutritional value, and its affordability are critical inputs to better health outcomes in Hispanic communities. Left unchecked, food insecurity is known to increase the prevalence of chronic diseases like diabetes and obesity. So as part of our cross-cutting approach to reducing the burden of chronic diseases, Novo Nordisk is finding ways to solve some of these issues, and I'm going to just tell you about a couple of them. At Arizona State University's College of Health Solutions, the Food as Medicine initiative connects low-income, primarily Hispanic participants in the Phoenix area to healthy food education about a healthy diet using nutrition students and medical students at FQHCs, or federally qualified health centers. Through the Faith and Diabetes program, we are reaching Latino houses of faith to deliver prevention and support programs for those with diet-related diseases, ensuring people have support and knowledge to better manage their health. In San Bernardino, California, we are working on a project with community health workers, or promotores, to deliver obesity prevention services to Hispanic populations that include education at the family level, physical activity, and access to healthy food. The project helps create changes at home and sustain those changes by building confidence through a peer support model. So in the end, Novo Nordisk is proud to support this panel of experts who are part of the ecosystem of innovation, delivering meaningful solutions to food insecurity in the Hispanic community. The solutions we generate collaboratively will foster an environment of equitable health that reduces the burden of diseases and improves health outcomes for all of our communities. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the panel has to offer.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Damon. I will now introduce you to the session's moderator, Javier Vega.
Okay. Gracias, buenas tardes. Do you hear me well? It's such a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I hope lunch was good, fabulous, and I hope you have a good energy back for the rest of the evening. So thank you for being here. And thank you to the Congressional Caucus, Hispanic Caucus Institute for inviting me to do this very important panel called Sustainable Nutrition for Latino Families. Now, I think this should be a top priority. You know, there's a direct connection between food and health, food and life. But unfortunately, right now, and you can correct me, but 1 out of 4 Latino families are experiencing food insecurity in our country right now, a reality that was experienced by 54 million Americans during the pandemic. Moreover, we know about inflation, what's going on with the prices, and the grocery bills are growing and growing, changing even the way we eat. Then we have climate change. So the rising global temperatures are also decreasing food production, and in short, climate change is also increasing hunger in the world. So in all of these contexts, there's a critical necessity of building, strengthening food systems that on one hand can help us save the environment, but also guarantee the access to nutritious foods for American families and for Latino families. And that's why we have an amazing panel here. So allow me to introduce them. Stacy Dean, Undersecretary for USDA's Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services. She works to advance President Biden's agenda on increasing nutrition assistance for struggling families. She's one of the top experts in our country in the fields of food and nutrition programs. Great to have you, Stacy. Caris Gutter leads government and industry affairs for Corteva Agriscience North America, a major agricultural, chemical, and seed company. Prior to joining Corteva, he served as USDA's Deputy Undersecretary for Farm and Foreign Agricultural Services. Welcome, Caris.
Thank you.
Keith Fernandez, Senior Manager for Social Impact Communications at DoorDash, an on-demand food delivery service. In his role, Fernandez leads communications for the company around food access and other social impact initiatives. And also, I just learned he's a CHCI alumni, right?
That's right.
It's great to have you, Keith. Bienvenido.
Good to be back.
Belinda Garza, Director of Federal Affairs for Instacart, an on-demand grocery delivery service. Garza leads the team responsible for engaging with Congress and the federal government. Bienvenida, Belinda. Welcome.
Gracias.
Bindu Pirlamarla, Head of Product and Program Management and User Experience Design for Underserved Populations in Amazon's consumer business. She has been in Amazon for 10 years. That's a lot. So welcome, Bindu. Thank you. It's great to have you here. So these are the experts. I'm just a journalist. I work for Telemundo. So I'm going to be asking the questions, and I'm going to be learning from them just like the rest of you. Make sure to take a nice picture, a nice video, put there a nice tweet, and we have a hashtag, which is CHCIHHM, which stands for Hispanic Heritage Month 22. So let's begin. And I would like to start with you, Stacy. Can you share with us, where are we? What's the latest data on food insecurity in our country, and how is it impacting, in particular, the Latino households?
Sure, thanks for the question. The Census Bureau measures food insecurity, and they actually just came out with numbers, I think, last week, showing that I think it's about 1 in 9 adults report that at some point during the last year they struggled to afford or access food. This isn't something that's equally experienced. So families with children, for example, have much higher rates than, let's say, senior citizens. It's also not equally experienced by race or ethnicity. And I think it's 1 in 6 Latino adults report that they experience food insecurity compared to 1 in 12 white adults. So, and while these numbers actually for households with children came down from the prior year, which is pretty extraordinary because it was for 2021, a pretty terrible year with respect to hardship in this country. And we think it's largely because of the very significant government response that helped keep hunger levels the same. They're still just too high, right? So they're too high overall, and the difference between the white food insecurity rate and the black and brown food insecurity rates, there's a gap there that is also extraordinary. So we have got to do things to bring those together. And to address the underlying causes and drivers of those differences, which is why we're here today.
Yeah, let me do a follow-up. How are people with low food insecurity or very low food insecurity dealing with this right now? I understand people are cutting their meals sometimes, not eating in a single day. How, do you measure this? So what's the latest about how people are dealing with this?
Right, you described, I think, some of the most obvious coping strategies, which is that particularly adults will almost always seek to shield children from hunger in their household. So adults will skip meals in order to let others in their households eat, they will eat less. And then the coping actually spreads out beyond this. It's not just food that they can't afford. It's often going to be paying their electricity bill, their utilities, being able to secure other important things like clothes for their kids. So there's hardship, stress, struggle. And it can be a full-time job navigating the extraordinary charitable network that we have in the country to try to meet your basic needs. So this is a huge weight on too many American families.
Let me go to Caris now. Caris, the United States is importing, I think, around 15% of the overall food supply. So how important is this concept of self-sufficiency? So self-sufficiency in terms of food production. Is it even achievable right now? Is it desirable? Can it be achieved? What do you think?
Good afternoon. Karis Gutter again with Corteva AgriScience. Corteva is a leading seed and crop protection company. So when we think about seeds, the United States is a net creator. So very excited about our ability to be sufficient or even self-sufficient. But rather respond directly to a self-sufficiency question, I think we need an all of the above approach, and we continue to need greater hands to help provide the food supply. We need greater innovation to help provide that food supply. And so when we think about the fastest growing populations of farmers in this country, they come from the Hispanic and Latino communities. When we think about the opportunity to innovate, it's companies like Corteva AgriScience that's going to continue to feed the world. You definitely began with some critical stats. In 2021, 1 in 4 individuals had challenges in food access. You also talked about in the Latino community, that's 1 in 3. Very concerning. And so we're going to have to innovate our ways out of this challenge. About a century ago, Corteva AgriScience was founded with some of the help of Henry Wallace. He founded a hybrid seed company about 100 years ago. And what that did is through hybrid seed, we've been able to increase our yield 7-fold. If we're gonna feed a population that's gonna grow to 10 billion by 2050, we're gonna need more innovation. We're gonna have to build on top of the successes that we've already achieved.
Perfect. And I think we will need to talk more about innovations later on in the panel. But let me go to Bindu. Bindu, preparing this session, I was reading an academic paper done by the OECD. So it has a very interesting quote, and I would like you to comment, to give us your opinion. So it says, overall, the biggest risk to food security is not food availability, but consumers' loss of income. Safety nets and food assistance are essential to avoid an increase in hunger. End of quote. Do you agree? Yes, no, and why?
Well, I'll echo a lot of what was already said with the panel. Because of these gaps in food access and food insecurity, these safety nets are incredibly important. And more important too is also giving customers the access and choice on how they can use some of these food safety net benefits. At Amazon, we are enabling SNAP customers to use those benefits on Amazon, not just for Amazon.com core groceries, but also multiple formats like Amazon Fresh or Whole Foods Market online. So I think there's the benefits are incredibly important, but also just the ability to use them.
Okay, Kit, now you work as a communication director in several initiatives that have to do with food access. So what are the barriers you have detected that impede, especially transportation, for example, the access for Latino families to nutritious foods?
Yeah, I mean, I think transportation access is exactly right. So I grew up in Miami, one of the worst places in the US to take public transportation. It was even stigmatized if you were getting on a bus or the metro rail. So when I moved to DC, it was a shock that people actually took public transportation and found it useful, because where I grew up, it was not something that people did. That's why at DoorDash, I'm so proud to work on Project Dash and help spread the word about how we're empowering food banks, food pantries, and other community organizations to leverage our DoorDash logistics, same logistics to get you your Chipotle burrito or your other consumer order, to deliver food right to the doorstep of folks who are in need and who just need that helping hand. So the way this works is just like any other Dash. A Dasher goes to a food bank. The consumer has signed up with the food bank beforehand. Dasher picks up the food and brings it to the recipient, either once a week week or whatever the food bank has determined the schedule is. And this is really helpful in addition to general transportation challenges, but for people with mobility issues, for seniors who can't pick up that 25-pound box of food and take it across any appreciable distance. And we've seen this work. In Hunger Free, in Pennsylvania, we have a partnership with Hunger Free PA, and we've seen their senior food box program increase by 15%, the participation rate, from 81% to 96% because of local delivery, because seniors can rely on delivery of charitable food. Overall, 85% of Project Dash deliveries are made to communities of color, but what I'm proudest about here is that we're making sure that food travels to people and not the other way around.
Okay, let me go to Belinda now. We all remember these empty shelves, terrifying empty shelves during the pandemic. Can you say that we're back to normal? What do you think, and how the pandemic impacted food accessibility in our country?
So I'll speak to the second question about accessibility. Stacy made a great point earlier about the large divide between the Latino and Black communities' food insecurity versus that of whites, and it's 2 to 1. So for Instacart, I'll back up and just give a little bit about who we are. So we're the leading grocery technology company in North America. We partner with 900 stores across the country and reach 75,000 storefronts. That's 90% of households across the US alone. So as Keith was saying too, we use our transportation to enable access for customers. They can choose which retailers they prefer and get the groceries that they want delivered to their home. We're working on that. We're also pleased to work with USDA on, just as Amazon enabling SNAP. We have brought on 2 out of 3 households can access SNAP online now, so we're very proud of that. We are in 49 states and DC and are still working to unlock Alaska. These are just a few of the initiatives that we've undertaken, and we're excited about what's to come in the coming months.
Yes, and I would like to talk even more about all these initiatives that are around and people can access to them. So, but first, let me go to Stacy to talk about a very important program, SNAP. So I was reviewing the latest data, and it's very interesting how the average benefit for each person has increased a lot in the last few years. So how is this program, what's the importance of this program for Latino families, and what else is right now the government doing to put food on the table?
Well, thanks for the question, and we're doing a lot, so you might have to cut me off at some point. I think we're doing 2 things. One is USDA and also just under the broader administration agenda, doing a lot to try to reform markets, and incorporate more resiliency into the food system, so that we don't see the kinds of difficulties we did early in the pandemic on food, making it from the farmer to the shelf. But we also need to help families cope, and that is a big part of what I do at USDA. So you mentioned the fact that SNAP benefits went up, and that's actually because Congress jumped in March of 2020 and offered states the option to plus up benefits with emergency benefits. That is still there as long as there's a federal public health emergency. States have that choice. Most of them are still taking it. So it's actually almost $3 billion a month in extra purchasing power going to low-income households right now, which is a really powerful help, particularly at a time with rising food costs. We've also got Congress created a new program to replace school meals for kids who are missing out on them. There were grab and go. I mean, really Congress did some extraordinary things to meet the moment. So there were grab-and-go setups, right? Schools could deliver meals in a very different way, but also there was an alternative where families got a benefit. And Congress actually extended that to the summer months. So for example, this summer, we, I think, have over 45 states issuing extra benefits during the summer that look like SNAP, to the tune of about $13 billion to families with kids. We're doing a lot to help our emergency food providers. Just today, the secretary announced he was going to provide an extra $1.5 billion to help food banks, and we're so pleased at partners like DoorDash who are helping to deliver that food. and then doing even more to help our schools cope. So we've really got an all-encompassing approach to deal with the folks who are experiencing hardship, and also the helpers, right, who are schools, emergency food, and others who are trying to meet those needs.
Perfect. So I would like to talk more about the initiatives, but first, let me talk about the innovations in farming, Karis. I was reading about your story and about your beginnings and your family in Mississippi, right?
Correct.
So your story is linked to farming from the very beginning. In my case, also, my dad is a farmer, was a farmer in Mexico, and but many things have changed in this last year. So what would you say are the latest innovations, especially the ones that impact the Latino farmers, to increase the food production?
Great question. How many out there know the song Old MacDonald Had a Farm? Heard it before?
Sure.
Right? Well, we're about 50 years from that song and the lyrics of it, right? Once upon a time, Old MacDonald had the farm. He had a tractor. He had a cow. Had a number of local innovations. But today, Old MacDonald has a combine. Old MacDonald has a laptop and is operating that combine from that tablet and smartphone. Old MacDonald has an entire supply chain to sell from point of market to around the globe. And so innovation has happened. Now, the mandate that's happened to us is the consumer has demanded more of and from us, and we've had to rise to the occasion. So Corteva has agronomists, Corteva has soil scientists, but we've also got sustainability experts. We've got computer scientists. So there's an entire digital business. I rattle off those innovations because innovation is happening. Some of the more novel innovations, though, are like plant breeding innovations, CRISPR-Cas9. CRISPR-Cas9 is how we will feed that growing planet here. CRISPR-Cas9 is a technique where we leverage the innovation of current plant science and we go into that next generation. Right now, when I mentioned we've increased a farmer's yield 7-fold over the last 100 years, we're gonna have to continue to do better than that because the demand that the consumers put on us is we want more sustainability. We want greater utility out of the land. We want you to deplete the nitrogen less. And our job in the lab is to make that happen. And so we're leveraging those innovations right now, such as CRISPR-Cas9. There are other innovations like biologicals. Biologicals is using natural ingredients. The consumer has said, we want fewer synthetic pesticides. We want fewer inputs. And we're delivering on that. We're now seeing climate change. And with climate change, the demand on us is to use less water, to have fewer runs of combustion engines across the field. And we're doing that. And so innovation is happening for us every day. And the last thing that I'll mention, I'll pass the torch here, is in digital solutions. One of our principles here is putting the right product on the right acre. And we use digital solutions, ag technology, drones, to help us know exactly where the seed needs to go, the amount of product. We've got weather analysis that tells us when the best time and the wind pressure is less. And we also are looking at pest pressures. And so again, I gave you a few of those examples to talk about. There's a vast amount of innovation happening every day. And when you ask about the Latino community, again, we need diverse populations to help us solve this challenge, whether it be at the farm gate or in the lab. And so very excited to be with you.
Yeah, this is very interesting. That's why I wanted to talk about innovations. And it seems like the future, but it's actually the present, right? So now let me go to talk about the major topic here, which are the initiatives. Now, Kid, Bindu, Belinda, you know the latest efforts, private-public partnerships to address these things about sustainable nutrition, about food insecurity. Can you share with us some examples? Who wants to begin? Bindu.
I can start. So the question being what are some of the top partnerships for food insecurity, and I'd actually point to SNAP Acceptance Online, and I'll talk about that on two folds. First, how we built it, but then two, how we also expanded it. So we started along with the USDA as a great partnership when we were starting to build it. I mean, this is the first time SNAP benefits were going to be able to be used online. And we recognize that there's likely customers who have never actually shopped groceries online, let alone use their SNAP benefit. And so we wanted to make sure that when we approach this and work backwards from the customer, that we really understood, are we offering the best experience? And working with the USDA to really understand the unique needs, the challenges, and how to do it in a way that would scale. Fast forward, we actually started in 2019 as one of the first retailers in New York. And by the end of 2019, we were only in 2 states. And then because of the COVID pandemic, that's where we had to expand. And we're humbled that we're able to partner with the USDA to expand. By the end of 2020, we went from 2 states to 46 states. And as of August, we are in 49 states in the District of Columbia. We actually, because we're able to offer nationwide coverage through not just the items that are shipped and sold from Fresh and Whole Foods, but also on Amazon Core, like shelf-stable products, gluten-free items, tortillas, lactose-free milk. We're able to actually reach almost 99%, over 99% of SNAP recipients. And so we're able to expand. And I'm actually excited because when I think about future programs such as WIC, when we started on SNAP Online, we launched in 2019, but the technical effort to build it actually took months and months. I mean, as a product leader, I sat with the engineers and kind of scoped out the requirements, and it's not a process that happened overnight. It was a lot of innovation and really thinking and working backwards from the customer to do so.
Thanks, Bindu. Belinda, Keith?
Absolutely, and I'll build off of that there. So in addition to EBT SNAP and bringing it online, we're also partnering with a lot of nonprofits to understand the research behind it and what impact it has to bring those services online. In a recent study with a nonprofit that we'll be excited to share more about later this month, what we did find is that whether you were a SNAP customer or a non-SNAP customer, you were buying more fresh fruits and vegetables. You could control your cost. So this meant you were not adding cost to your shopping list, but you were buying more fruits and vegetables. So you were cognitive of that. Number 2 is that they really appreciated that there was no stigma. So they could control their costs, they could control what they were buying, and they could do so in an anonymous way. So those are things that we're also excited to extend to other programs so that more customers can experience that same thing. Nonprofits, I'm sure Keith will go into some of that as well. But I think there's a lot on the horizon. We're excited about the White House conference later this month too, where we'll talk about a lot of successes in programs like this, and also about the future initiatives that are on the horizon.
Absolutely. I think for us, it's unlocking the local delivery of charitable food. Project Dash started in 2017 as an employee hackathon, and in 2018, we established it and scaled it to grow. The pandemic hit, and then obviously with stay-at-home orders, folks needed to go to food banks and food pantries, but couldn't because you either couldn't get a way to go there, or it was really a medical decision day by day that could endanger your life. What we've seen over time is that the need for this sort of service continues, whether it's inflation, economic pressures, so many other things that are bearing down on families, on seniors, on college kids, and the versatility of local delivery of charitable food and essential items. Recently we partnered with the Texas Food Bank to deliver diapers. And it's one of these things that I think pre-pandemic, we didn't really think about much, and now it's been made so obvious to us that people who are in need, people who experience need, should have the same convenient solutions that all the rest of us use.
Thank you. Carrie, Stacy, would you like to add something to this topic about initiatives addressing food insecurity, sustainable nutrition?
Do you mind if I jump in? Well, I just want to lift up, and first of all, what 3 amazing partners to USDA, but also just struggling families across the country. But you mentioned the White House conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. So just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. On September 29th, President Biden is convening the first in 50 years a conference. So we're really just so thrilled that we're calling attention to these incredibly important issues. We'll be talking about the government solutions, the role of the private sector, innovation from communities, and so I think that will be, we hope, a launching
You need
pad
to
for-
give me an interview that day.
All right, you got it. But hopefully we launch even more innovation. I look forward to it.
And the only thing that I would add is we're not a consumer delivery aspect of the value chain, but we are an input. And so for our part, we're a sponsor of the Global Food Security Index. We're a major investor ensuring that data globally about food insecurity is available. We're sponsoring and funding land grant as well as academic institutions to be at the table to ensure that there's adequate information available to the market so that smart folks like these can help solve these food insecurity challenges.
Okay, so in a few minutes, I'm going to open the microphone to questions. I'm sure many of you have something to say about this issue, about this topic. First, I'm gonna make a couple of questions, but think about what can you ask about the chronic diseases, because I was speaking at the beginning about the connection between food and health, food and life. So what's the impact of food insecurity in these chronic diseases? Let's talk about obesity, diabetes, especially in Latino population. Who would like to answer? Bindu.
Me.
Belinda.
Me, yes. You have the bees next to each other.
You both can answer.
So it's a really great question. It's something that we feel very passionate about. And it's giving people access to nutritious foods and giving them more time to spend it together. This is mission driven for our entire company from the top down. And something that we care very much about is providing that access. As I mentioned, SNAP is just the first step in all of this, but providing information about individualized nutrition needs. So that is something that the online platform really provides. Number two is giving them choice. That was something else that was mentioned before. It's incredibly important, giving them the tools to make those decisions that are right for them. So we're excited about that as well. It is, a million studies have been done about preventative health and starting with food as medicine, and that is very powerful, and it's something that we're excited to talk more about in the coming weeks.
Bindu.
Sure. I guess to add to that, I mean, when I think about chronic disease, I mean, it's $3.8 trillion is generally the amount of spend in this country. And we know that lower income individuals have an 18% higher rate of suffering from a chronic disease than their higher income counterparts, and largely is treated through food prescriptions. And so when I think about how do we enable it, I mean, we've talked a lot about transportation and food access, but I also think about just giving customers more choice to be able to do that. At the end of the day, I mean, food is personal. Food is very taste driven, and if you don't have culturally relevant food to be able to tailor to meet the diet that your healthcare provider is recommending, that's a challenge. And so when I think about Amazon, I think about kind of the hundreds of thousands of food items that can be purchased. I'm really excited about that because we're able to offer that in a way with, low prices, convenient shipping, delivery to your doorstep, to kind of really think through, how to purchase. I think about, also additional things that we don't do, right? Like I think third-party sellers offer a lot of culturally relevant selection today that is not SNAP eligible today. And that's an area that I think is something that we'd like to continue to work through.
Thank you. Now think about inflation. Many people believe that healthy food is more expensive. As far as I understand, that has been studied and it's a myth. But still, is it more difficult to provide healthier food? How do we drive people towards healthy options? Because one thing is what we want and the other thing is what we need. Who would like to answer?
Well, hopefully they're both the same, wanting and needing. But I mean, just to cross the T and dot an I on the last point, right? Diet-related disease is, in fact, it's an epidemic in this country. Most children, by the time they're 35, will be obese. We have 600,000 deaths a year that are diet-related, and I think there's an estimate now that during COVID, I believe a third of deaths could have been prevented, and 2/3 of hospitalizations had the individuals not been struggling with underlying diet-related diseases. So this is a really serious issue, and I think we believe it's critical for us to address, which is why nutrition security, it goes hand in hand with food insecurity at USDA. We believe we've got to tackle both. We don't hold all the answers, right? There are lots of other players that are important here. And why it's so great to see leaders like Ms. Guzman, who will be forging a new path in the future in this space. But in terms of what you said, I think a lot of it, you are right. You can purchase a healthy low-cost diet. And we actually just reevaluated the basis for SNAP benefits and came up with estimates for what that kind of diet costs. We saw that SNAP benefits were too low, and we adjusted them upward to reflect those costs. But there's still, it is doable. But a lot of it is knowledge. Do you have the information? Have you been exposed to the foods? Have you learned how to cook those foods? And also, let's just be frank, a lot of low-income households who are really struggling, they may not have a kitchen. They may not have a refrigerator. So the idea of fresh tomatoes, with no place to store them is a real challenge. So there's a lot of layers to all of this, and I don't think it rests solely with the individual. There's a lot of systemic drivers that get us to where we are. Look, I see others wanting to jump in, but it's affordable. The question is it accessible and manageable in your life? And we've got to make that all much more doable for all households.
Okay, somebody else wants to add about this question? Okay, let me do my last question, and then we go to the audience. Thinking about the future, with climate change, supply chains issues, with food insecurity, what's the future of our country in this sense, in food insecurity? And how do you feel it's different from the rest of the world? Difficult question.
I can tackle part of it, which I think is the stigma around accessing charitable food and accessing help where you need it. I mean, I think that